Well, good evening and welcome to Funding DIY Creative Enterprises. I'm Mike Lawrence. I am a member of the Collective. I've been Silent Barn's attorney for the last 4 years, since 2013. I have a law practice at Lawrence Law, and over there I do general business and entertainment law. In April, I did a panel on sustaining legal DIY venues, and during the course of that panel, the members of the panel talked about spaces that they're a part of, DIY spaces, and how they were able to obtain the funding. That wasn't the focus of that panel, but and we touched on those issues briefly, but it became apparent during that meeting that we could devote a whole meeting to that topic, to how does a business fund itself. Over the last couple of decades, the way that that's happened has changed. Banks have not given out as many loans. When they do give out loans, it's not for as much money as in the past. State, federal, and local governments haven't been funding the arts like they have. But on the positive side, we do have crowdfunding platforms that have cropped up, like Kickstarter. You'll hear a little bit about that company tonight. We've had artist consultants help small arts companies get the funding they need. We've also had membership platforms like Friends, who you'll hear about tonight, and also community banks have stepped up, and they've managed to give out more loans in the form of SBA loans and microfinance. So tonight, the purpose of the panel is just to assess the wide landscape of how funding happens in today's day and age. We have a very accomplished panel here who will take you through the whole gamut of those issues. So let's find out who they are. So Sienna Aristaglio is an artist, educator, and communications specialist. She has 10 years of experience in communications for the arts and has led international campaigns covered by outlets including the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. As Director of Communications for Maria Abramovic Institute, she ran the nonprofit's successful 2013 Kickstarter campaign, raising over $660,000 in 30 days. In her work with the Void Academy, she has helped artists and arts organizations raise over $1.5 million and counting towards their projects. Sienna has lectured at the Museum of Fine Arts, New York University, MoMA PS1, and the 92nd Street Y, among others. Thank you, Sienna, for being here. Molly Newman is the first head of music at Kickstarter. Prior to joining Kickstarter, Molly was interim president and vice president of the American Association of Independent Music and held senior roles in labor relations at Rhapsody International and eMusic. She also worked with both artist management and on the label side as both founder and owner of her own company, Simple Social Graces Discos, and as a partner at Lookout Records. Additionally, she has served on the boards of Sound Exchange and the American Association of Independent Music. One fun fact, I don't know how many of you are Bratmobile fans, but Molly was also in that band as well. So we'd like to thank Molly for being here. Joe Ahern is the co-founder, along with Kunal Gupta, who's also here, of a new fundraising tool called Friends. During most days, previously he worked as program director at Clock Tower and has spent nights and weekends for almost a decade helping run Silent Barn. He's lived in and helped set up collective and independent spaces like Death by Audio, Dead Herring, Secret Project Robot, Market Hotel, and many more, as well as working with arts organizations on the complete other end of the spectrum, like MoMA PS1, New Museum, Pioneer Works, Knockdown Center, Roulette, Issue Project Room, and spaces like these all across the United States and the world. Well, sounds like a list of all the places that I go. Well, thank you, Joe, for being here. Samira Rajan is the CEO of Brooklyn Cooperative Federal Credit Union. Samira has held this position since 2008. She is also the executive director of the credit union's 501c3 affiliate, Grow Brooklyn. Samira has been with the credit union from its first year when she served as an AmeriCorps Vista volunteer. After the year of service was complete, she joined as full-time staff in 2002 as loan officer and has taken on increasing levels of responsibility ever since. Her educational background includes a BA from Bryn Mawr College and an MPP from Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. Thank you, Samira, for being here. All right, well, at this time, we're going to take a few minutes to hear from our panelists on how their companies help small arts companies, like hopefully people in the audience want to be a part of. So we'll start with Sienna.
Hello. Hi. Thanks, Mike. Mm-hmm. So my company is called The Void Academy, and I started it with two other co-founders 2 years ago. One of my co-founders is here in the back, lovely bald gentleman over there, and the other one is currently in a car in Arizona. But basically what we do is our mission is to help artists make a living and to help arts organizations become sustainable. And how we do that is by delivering online courses and workshops, in-person workshops and online workshops, to artists and organizations, specifically focused on online methods of crowdfunding and building, a strong web presence that enables artists and arts organizations to build their communities, to grow their communities, and to fund the work that they do. And yeah, is that all the?
Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you.
So as Mike mentioned, I'm the first head of music at Kickstarter, but music has been core to Kickstarter's mission since it was a germ of an idea. I think one of our co-founders, Perry Chen's, originally had a vision of bringing some DJs over when he was living in New Orleans in the early 2000s and like sort of bringing the community together to support that initiative. And it didn't end up working, but he spent the next 8 or 9 years plotting how he could make that happen. And so 8.5 years later, Kickstarter, has funded in music over 26,000 projects successfully. We've raised $200 million for musicians and music-related companies like Silent Barn and Shea Stadium and lots of other, physical venues and recording studios and sort of labels all throughout the different parts of the music ecosystem. I see what I'm trying to do specifically. I've been there for just over 1.5 years to really help artists have the strongest position possible from the start of their career. And so if they have not just the sort of financial support that they receive from their community, but the learning and sort of what you're doing in terms of helping people understand the need for communicating with their audience and maintaining connections and the campaign-oriented aspect of it, that it's a finite window of time, and if you don't raise the money that you have set as your goal, you won't get it. It's kind of a different dimension of emotion that makes it, I think it's really important learning for a lot of artists, and my hope is that throughout the music, so from the label side and attorneys and music publishers and the whole business, seeing the foundation of artists have a greater position of strength will hopefully be to the benefit of the whole world, which is well documented to be in pretty dire straits. People are saying it's on an upswing right now, but we'll see. So that's my sort of general philosophy about what we're trying to do.
So the project that that sort of cuts to the heart of what we're talking about today for me is this project called Friends. If you RSVP'd for tonight's show, you used it. Silent Barn is one of the organizations that's piloting it. It's a fundraising tool that takes and supercharges an existing audience by turning them into members and asking them for reoccurring donations. And basically that whole list of organizations that I've been involved in, arts institutions, DIY spaces, all of that. I'm essentially trying to take all of the things that I've learned from a development perspective that places like the Whitney or Pioneer Works or all of these other places try to use to turn into large campaigns. Some of the same tricks, I think, that Sienna teaches people at Void Academy, and turn it into a very simple and easy to use platform that somebody can, anyone, a 15-year-old kid who's starting a project in their parents' basement can set up in less than 10 minutes, and they can just keep promoting the shows and doing the things that they're already doing, and it will help find the people in their community who might be willing to support more. So just like really simply, it's you RSVP or buy tickets, and at the moment right before you check out, it asks you if you'd like to become a reoccurring member, and then it stays in touch with you through email and helps you learn about new events that are coming up and other ways that you can get more involved. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. The credit union helps artists specifically in two ways, and from our point of view, we're just going to call you guys self-employed because it's not about the industry. The credit union offers, on the one hand, financial services. These include accounts, so savings accounts and checking accounts for small businesses, and they include a range of loans. Probably the things that are most interesting to this audience are the business accounts. Along the way, as you develop and formalize your business, you may have received advice to open a separate bank account. These can be prohibitive at banks. The credit union is probably much more friendly in that regard. There are lower standards for what the level of formalization you need to be able to open a business account. You don't need the EIN number. You don't need to be incorporated right at the beginning. If your priority is to be able to just start tracking your business income and expenses separately, then that's usually one of the pieces of advice you get initially. So we have business accounts. The business loans that we do are very friendly to small businesses and to the self-employed. Our average business loan is about $19,000. Our average personal loan is about $25,000. So what we'll often see is people, depending on their stage of formalization and depending on their loan purpose and their needs, falling somewhere in that range from $500 to $10,000 to $15,000 up to $35,000, $50,000 for their small businesses. We are SBA lenders. We've been SBA lenders since 2008. And we do a pretty decent volume of business loans. It's interesting sometimes if it occurs to you to check, if you look at the lists of SBA lenders in Kings County, by volume, Brooklyn Co-op is up there. Like we're in the top 5 or top 10 dispersals, originations of small business loans. We're much lower down right when it comes to dollar size because we don't do, the $1 million or $2 million loans that the larger banks will do. So I think that over the last 15, 16 years that we've been doing this, we've accumulated a good deal of experience and understanding on how the very small micro businesses and the self-employed conduct their work. And I think we're able to evaluate loan applications in a good way. The second thing that the credit union does for the self-employed is tax preparation guidance and filing. That's something that we formalized in 2009. Maybe some people are familiar with it. Rebecca was our tax preparer before, and now it's Tammy. We will be able to guide you through how to file your taxes, whether as an individual or as a corporation. We'll do the preparation and filing for you, and then there are some associated bookkeeping services that we'll provide if you're interested.
All right. Thank you. So we're gonna, this part of the panel discussion is going to be questions delivered by myself to the panel. That's going to run about 45 minutes, at which time we'll ask the audience to come up with questions for our panelists. So the first topic we're going to talk about is obtaining a conventional bank loan. And so I'm going to address the first few questions to Samira. First question I have is, who are good candidates for a conventional bank loan?
Okay. Conventional bank loan, so that means, one of the larger banks.
Exactly.
Yeah. think what the larger banks, this is no surprise to anybody. I think what the larger banks are looking for is a business with significant experience and significant collateral. They will want formal financial statements. They will want audits. They will want demonstration of your collateral. They will want appraisals and valuations of that collateral. They will look for things like minutes of your meetings of the board of directors. There will be annual monitoring in place. There will be usually strings attached with regard to the type of accounts that you will hold at that banking institution. So the right candidate for a conventional bank loan is probably a business that earns over $250,000, over $300,000 a year, and has staff in place, has capacity in place to be able to fulfill those requirements, right? Somebody prepares the financial statements, somebody communicates back and forth with the auditor on whatever the auditor needs, somebody keeps track of the bookkeeping in a way that satisfies those requirements.
Okay, so what you're saying is a DIY venue isn't a good candidate for a conventional bank loan.
Maybe one day,
So how, if I'm trying to start a business, is there any chance of me getting that type of loan? If I just say I have a great idea and I think it's going to make a lot of money, but I have no experience, you would advise that person not to go to Chase or
no.
Citibank?
No.
So they would go to Brooklyn Cooperative.
They may well come to Brooklyn Cooperative. That would be fine. That
They still need a little more.
that happens a couple of times a day. There are a range of organizations in the city, oftentimes offering services for free, which specialize in this kind of pre-startup or startup phase. Some of you may be familiar with the Business Solution Centers or the Small Business Development Centers. They're run by the city and the federal government. There are also various nonprofits that offer assistance to pre-startup businesses, mostly in the form of technical assistance, right? Like how to write a business plan, how to present yourself, how to get your bank statement in gear. If your business will require licensing, then how might you go about doing that licensing? Sometimes the City of New York has initiatives that make it easier for perhaps minorities, perhaps women, perhaps just whoever, to go through those hurdles to become licensed and qualified to do your small business. So those will take some digging around. So probably those kinds of things you'll do before you walk through the door of the financial institution. So if the question is, okay, at what stage do I walk through the doors of the financial institution? I think that for businesses less than 2 years old, the advice we most frequently offer is keep your day job, right? Because your business isn't going to really be earning the amount of income it needs to support you. And we will treat startups and businesses less than 2 years old, somewhere on the spectrum between personal and between a business loan. Having an alternate source of income allows for a great deal of comfort because no business will have positive income, well, except for your businesses, in the first 4 to 6 months of when they start, right? So you will need to be able to demonstrate to the bank satisfaction that there's going to be money there to make the loan payments. If that's not possible for you directly because you're running a business, then you bring in a cosigner, right? Or you'll have some other way of saying that in the months that the business can't produce the income, there's still a way that the loan gets paid.
Okay, so you're at the point now where you've gotten the counseling and you're going to the bank and you have all your paperwork in order, your business plan. Can you talk a little bit about the different types of loans that community bank such as Brooklyn Co-op offers?
Sure. It's not complicated. For the most part, the product that suits best is a loan. It's a straight up loan. The advantages are that the interest rate is fixed and your repayment is fixed. You can choose to take your dispersal in the form of a credit card, which is the same as a line of credit because you can fill it and then deplete it, over the course of months. The downsides are that the payment will not be fixed. It'll vary depending on what you've spent in that month, and the interest rate will also vary.
Okay.
So I think for the most part, the loan works well for businesses that are going to be super focused on ensuring that their expenses are predictable.
And so, when a conventional bank gives out a loan and when a community bank gives out a loan, are there less stringent requirements? How would you say? What are the areas that someone going to a community bank can afford not to satisfy when they come to a bank like yours?
I'm going to substitute for the term community bank. I'm going to substitute the term CDFI. So you may have run across this term, community development financial institutions. If you do searches for CDFI business lending, you'll see a variety of different providers. There is such a thing as a community bank, which is also a CDFI. As a tangent, the CDFI is a designation by the Department of the Treasury, and it indicates that an organization has fulfilled 6 particular requirements that it's like a seal of approval, right? So it means that you are not-for-profit. It means that you do financing as your primary line of business. It means you are not supported by a government agency. It means that you are mission-driven, whatever the other 2 are. Or 3, sorry, not enough. So the CDFI lenders that you'll find, there are large national ones like the Opportunity Funds. There are large New York City ones like the New York Business, those, I forget what they're called. Those, their website is excelsiorfunds.org. Then there are little tiny ones, local around us, like there's Canva, and then there's BOC, Business Opportunity, Business Outreach Center. There's us, right, we're a CDFI. The CDFIs, in comparison to a conventional bank, will offer, I think, a lot of advantages for the self-employed and for very small businesses in the areas of size, right? So we'll do loans that are less than $5,000 or less than $10,000. For the most part, I think it might be interesting here to just think about, to think about the industry that you're in, to the extent to which your guys' industry will not require, for example, heavy capital investments. I mean, maybe there is, but maybe for the most part there isn't. You're not trying to ask for like a dry cleaning machine to run your dry cleaner. That'll help keep your loan sizes small. So insofar as you're looking at smaller loan sizes, then the CDFIs are more interesting, or they'll be more interested in you. Insofar as you would like to be able to have a little bit more of a relationship, a little bit more technical assistance as you go through the loan process, then the CDFIs will be better at it. There are some CDFIs that will formally tie, like those will be their strings, right? That if you get the loan from us or if you apply from us, then you will have to go through the class, like the small business finance class, or they will make sure that you have a counselor assigned to you who will monitor your performance over the course of the loan. Maybe that's something you want, maybe that's something that you don't want, but a bank won't do that. Insofar as you're looking for a little bit more hand-holding, then the CDFI will be better at that. The CDFI will also have a much larger appetite for risk. So there will be, aside from the formal obstacles of a bank, in like the ones I said before, like the financial statements, the audit, the collateral, this or that, they'll also have very high barriers in terms of just qualifying. There's not so much risk that they're trying to take on their business loans. CDFIs, because we're mission-driven, and the reason that we do business loans is to encourage local economic development, we will have an appetite for more risk, and that means that there won't be a strict credit score requirement. Brooklyn Co-op doesn't have a minimum credit score to qualify for a loan. We will allow for things like cosigners. Cosigners are fine. We won't require 100% or 80% collateral. We'll find collateral somewhere else. That's what it means to be an SBA lender. So I think in those 3 facets at least, the CDFIs are maybe a better match for business at your stage. Okay.
So what would you say then is like the minimum requirement for someone coming to a CDFI? If they don't have to have a certain credit score or 100% collateral, or some of the other items you mentioned, like what is the sort of mission critical aspect of starting a business and coming to a CDFI that needs to be met?
You ought to be able to demonstrate that you are committed to and able to demonstrate your business performance, right? So it's not going to be a personal loan. There are those who, twice a day, come through the credit union. I want to, open a beauty salon where all the beauticians wear bikinis, because I've heard that one. So, like, fine. Or you want to have a business where, you do something based on the internet, or you want to do whatever it is that you want to do, fine. The reason it's not going to be a personal loan is because you're going to say, and I will be able to track my business expenses and my business income, and I will be able to demonstrate to you after 6 months or 8 months or when I come back for my next loan that this is my progress to date. I'll have a business bank account. I will declare my business income on the tax return. If I'm already incorporated, then I'll have a corporate tax return. So it isn't about, I think, I don't think that you'll have to demonstrate all of those. You could be, and we've had this also too, right? Like the guy who's an accountant who also is opening an acupuncture salon. Fine. The accountant thing is going to happen because that's his day job. But then he's also going to be able to say, with the salon, I have this partner who knows what she's doing and she's qualified. I have, this is how I'm going to track the income. This is how the clients are going to be recruited. This is how we're going to market. So I think you ought to be able to demonstrate that you are serious about tracking your business in a way that we can have confidence that this is a business loan and it's not a personal loan.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So let's say that you have a business and you want to be funded to the level of, say, $50,000 or $100,000. Is it practical to think that you're going to get all your money from a bank loan?
Not the bank, for sure not the bank. A CDFI could do that. 50,000 to 60,000. The credit union's maximum unsecured business loan will be 50,000. You would have to have, really a sterling application in the sense of being able to demonstrate strong alternate income, a good credit history, a good business plan. Hopefully you've already had clients in place. Hopefully you can say, over the last 6 to 12 months, I have generated this much income, and I do believe I'll generate this much income going forward. It's unusual to fund a startup or a small business at that level, but it has happened.
Okay. A couple of items you mentioned earlier. One was a line of credit.
Yeah.
So what is the difference between a loan and a line of credit?
A line of credit is revolving. So if you take a line of credit for $10,000, you have the option of drawing all of those funds at one time, and filling up the line, and then your payments over the next, it'll be set. So for us, it'll be 36 months. So over the next 36 months, we'll set your payments such that you will pay that off in 36 months. But then you retain the option after 6 months, something went really well, and then you pay the whole thing back, right? It remains open. Our lines of credit will remain open for 12 months. So you could come back within the next, up to the 12 months, and then redraw $10,000. You'll get yourself on another payment schedule to pay it back, and then you can choose, to make those monthly payments, or again, do the same cycle, pay the whole thing off, and then pull it again. Lines of credit tend to work for businesses which have specific cycles.
Okay. Now, with something like lines of credit and loans, they're often secured by collateral. Is something like that a requirement for a CDFI? Can someone take out a loan or a line of credit with by not putting up their house, for example, or having any security tied to that loan or line of credit?
Yes, we won't. Real estate collateral comes in at much larger loan sizes. What will end up happening? I mean, I can't speak for all CDFIs because they will have different mechanisms in place. The ones that are banks or credit unions are different in character than the ones that are nonprofit loan funds. So just to speak to Brooklyn Cooperative's method, if you apply for and are qualified for a business loan under $50,000, we will seek to enroll you into the SBA because we're SBA lenders. The SBA will ask a couple of questions. One, are you legal resident in this country? And number two, have you been convicted of a felony? If you are able to say yes to the first and no to the second, then we'll be able to get our collateral from the SBA. And so you won't be asked to put up collateral on your own. If you're unable to answer those questions in the right way, then we will ask you for collateral, and our policy is that we request 50% collateral. So you'll have to come up with, cars or cash or stuff that's 50% of your loan value.
And I mean, what is your thought on just using your home as collateral? Because business is inherently risky. Is that something you would advise someone to do, or it depends on the circumstance? If you were advising someone who came to you and asked if it was a good idea, how would you approach that?
It's very complicated and difficult. We've had occasions in the past where business loans are, large sizes, over 100, over 150,000. For us, that's large. And at that point, we're going to request real estate collateral. So to be perfectly honest, when it's happened in the past, it's usually like the parent, right, is taking out a home equity loan in order to support the child's dream. So those are complicated, right? Because that's family and that's somebody's home. It may not work out. What happens then? So we've had cases where it didn't work out. The kid is doing whatever the kid is doing, and the dad pays the loan, for the rest of the loan. Or that the kid just gets involved in serial businesses one after the other, and the dad, stays with him the whole time. Those relationships are not ones that we're going to be able to parse from the outside. I will say that for a new business or for somebody who is starting, who hasn't had significant experience in that particular business, to risk real estate is a dramatic decision.
So given that, are there alternative means for collateral you would suggest? Or what are the other options? Like, if I don't want to put up my home as collateral, what could I do? What could I use for collateral?
I mean, I guess that's hard to answer. It's really the same question as, where do I get the money to start my business? It's going to vary. There are some businesses, so in the two examples I just gave of where they needed substantial startup funds, and were able to secure that with real estate, is because one was a grocery store, and the other one was a bar where he was going to make it fancy with a zinc bar, and all of this. Where there's not a lot of places you can get that kind of money, and I guess this is where we start to wander into the expertise of other panelists, as far as where you get that quantity of money if you're not able to supply the collateral yourself. I guess that's what venture capital is for too. But it's going to be unusual. I don't think I've ever seen somebody able to fund their own business with an equity investment of their own without real estate implicated of more than $30,000 to $35,000.
Okay. All right. So I think we've touched a lot on that area of banks and loans. I think we're going to go into the issue of crowdfunding, which we have two panelists that could speak about. So my first question.
Can I say something? Just
Sure.
To respond.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting for you to go over this entire list of different financing options, because I think that Silent Barn has done almost every bad example that you just listed over the last 6 years, including, I believe, I think the first time we met was when I came into your office a year before we found this place, and we found another crazier place that was a totally bad idea. Yeah, you do remember that. That was the first time. And I think basically we did exactly what your first example was, where I was like, oh, well, maybe they'll listen to me. And I was one of those two people that walked in, and you were very nice and welcoming, and correctly advised us that we were not ready, and that was not a good idea. And we went back to the drawing board. And so yeah, thank you for letting Silent Barn make so many mistakes, and as well as other spaces. No, we never did that. That first idea was bad. That was not ever a good idea. It was just way too big. No, it was just we were looking for $1 million or something like that. We can ask questions about that later.
I'm sure we will. Okay. So let's get into crowdfunding, which is a very popular thing to do nowadays. That's how we ended up here, is that we had a crowdfunder with Kickstarter and raised $40,000. So it's a topic close to our hearts. And I guess my first question is for Sienna. And I'm just going to ask, from the perspective of an arts organization consultant, what is or should be involved in preparing for a crowdfunding campaign?
It's a great question. So I think even the question itself is really important just on its own, that it does require quite a bit of preparation for a crowdfunding campaign. So the first thing to keep in mind is sometimes we have artists who come to us knowing that we advise on crowdfunding projects, and they'll come and say, I'm launching my campaign in 3 days. What can you tell me? What do I need to do, right? And I think this idea that you can just throw a page up there and that there are some magical people on the internet who will give you money is a big misconception around crowdfunding that somehow floats around out there. So I think that's one of the things that whenever I'm talking to artists or arts organizations, this idea that actually, yeah, when you're running a campaign, even though you have full control over it and you can control the timing, what you want to do is really put in some legwork, put in some preparation. And that said, I think the main things to do are really to plan. So what you want to do is you want to create, if you're thinking of running a crowdfunding campaign, you want to create an action plan for what's going to happen on each day of the campaign. You want to create an outreach plan. So you want to make a big list. One of the first things we tell artists to do is make a big list of everyone that you can think of that you can reach out to one-on-one to engage when you are running that campaign. I think there's another thing that floats around that you can just blast social media and blast your mailing list with crowdfunding campaigns, and that will get the campaign funded. And really the thing that we advise artists to do is to reach out as much as possible on a one-on-one basis to people in their community, to anyone who has said, I love your artwork, to anyone whose email you have or personal direct connection you have, because that actually really forms the basis of a crowdfunding campaign. So having that list ahead of time, even creating some templates that you can use to reach out on a one-on-one basis is a really great step in terms of preparation. One of the courses that we have on our website for the Void Academy is actually called Step-by-Step Crowdfunding Preparation. So that's a question that can be answered by watching a 2-hour course. These are just two big things that I like to focus on when giving advice in a short setting, which is create an action plan for every day of the campaign. What am I putting out to my community? What kind of content? And that's a really important thing. Video content, photos, not just shouting into the void. Hey, back the campaign, but showing and showing the work that you plan to produce, and then having that outreach plan where you know who you're going to be reaching out to and when.
Okay. And Molly, I think everyone knows. Everyone knows with a Kickstarter campaign what happens on the day that it's launched. But I'm sure there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes before that. Could you just explain the interactions that you have with creators or the companies that create the Kickstarter? And
sure. Yeah, I mean, and certainly, like today, there are, I think, 389 music projects that are live. So we're not talking to most of them. Just a handful are we engaging, directly one-to-one on, pre-planning and campaign management and hopefully post-successful funding. But we do like to give, the platform, there's 15 different categories besides music. So there are a lot of resources that are focused on each individual category, but also things that are sort of must-haves, and some people listen or read them, and some people don't. I mean, that's unfortunate that a lot of the prep work that Sienna is talking about should really be, in anyone's plan. Some people put up campaigns with a little bit of text and expect them to be successful, and unfortunately, it doesn't usually happen that way. One of the things, as an having been an artist in my career and running a label and having managed artists as well, I think that the work that's involved in preparing a campaign and launching it and executing it and the sort of work of communicating with your audience, it's really critical experience. And so beyond just the goal and the finance aspect of it, the actual functional skills, I guess hard skills that you would acquire are really important. And I think that is something that's maybe not as sexy about running a campaign. But my hope, again, is that artists, and especially musicians who use the platform will just have a lot more autonomy and authority and leverage as they sort of enter their careers long term to be able to have experience, and they aren't just, if a great label comes along and offers them a deal, they know how to process it, and they know, actually, my value is much more than this first pass that you're giving me. And as an attorney, I hope you could appreciate that. Some I don't think do. You want the strongest opportunity there. So, to really answer your question, though, the resources depend on the, if it's someone that I've been trying to bring to the platform, or someone that is a trusted person that's connected us, then there's a little higher level of engagement. But generally, we try to say, these are things that every campaign should be thinking about. Mm-hmm. Strong images, music on the page. That's unfortunately not something that's always there for music campaigns, and really a plan of external communication, and while the campaign's live, engaging with those people, because they're really there to help make the creative project happen. And they want to be a part of it, and they're almost the most critical part of your team.
Okay, so did you?
Can I just add one?
Yeah, sure.
I just want to say I completely agree with you on that, Molly, and I actually think that part of the other side of it, the non-financial side, of course, yes, the goal of a crowdfunding campaign is to raise the money, but I actually think that the other side of it is kind of sexy, which is that you're figuring out how to communicate about the work that you're creating, how to engage people with this work that you are putting into the world, and you're learning about yourself and what you want to share about the work with the people that will ultimately support it, and may support you as an artist long into the future, or an arts organization long into the future as well, if you do a good job at sharing your excitement with them and your enthusiasm with them. So that part, I think, is really, it is overlooked. And most people really are focusing on, did we hit our number? And I think it is actually really important to think about the other things, that in just the process of creating the campaign, in spending 30 days, or however long, we always advise 30 days, to running and sharing this work with a whole bunch of people, and having them spread the word to new people who may not know your art, or you as an arts organization, that part of it is equally as valuable and sexy. But also, yeah, and I think that too, one of the things I advise artists or arts organizations when they're about to launch a campaign is to make sure that they go out there, go to the platform like Kickstarter, and look around, right? Look around at the projects. What is going to compel you as a potential backer to back a given project, to put your dollar or your $10 towards something? What are the things that make you excited to actually get involved, and how can you apply those things to your own campaign? So that's.
Okay, and let's say an artist doesn't come to you, Sienna, for your knowledge about how to prepare for a Kickstarter. Let's say they go straight to Kickstarter, and their thought is, I just want $100,000, but they haven't thought about the transactional costs involved, or like the cost of shipping, things like that. Does Kickstarter do anything on that end? Or?
Well, we actually have a process of every music campaign, at least, so that's the vertical I control. They get an email with advice the day after they launch, or every business day after they launch. So if it launches on the Saturday, they'll get it Monday. But that has, just a reminder of the resources available, sort of the fundamentals. There's always a chance to change any aspect of the campaign except for the goal or the duration. So, there's a lot of opportunity, especially on day one, to iterate and to adjust and to improve, or cancel. Like, if you realize that you're out of the zone with the 100,000, that maybe you should rethink the whole thing. The other thing is, many campaigns across the whole entire site that launch and aren't successful, if they do try again, they've learned so much about where the gaps are in their audience or their communication, and what they didn't realize first. So that's important.
Okay. So Sienna, I know, so your clients are for the most part arts organizations. Like, is it a challenge trying to get some arts organizations to think more like this is a business and we should approach it in a more deliberate way. What are your thoughts on that? Is that an important part of your work?
Yeah, I think it depends. And our clients range from individual artists to arts organizations. And I would actually say now we mostly work with individual artists, although we do some consulting and workshops with arts organizations as well. But I think whenever you're talking to artists, there is a little bit of an allergy to the word business or to the thinking about what you're doing as being running a business or being an entrepreneur. And I think that there's a taboo in the arts in general in talking about money and where the money, how to actually go about the nuts and bolts of funding your art, which is why I do think that artists tend to get exploited by institutions who say, hey, you don't have to do any of that. Just think about the creative side and we'll do everything, but we're going to take a cut. And I think, as you kind of mentioned before, artists who don't want to think about those things end up in positions where they're really being taken advantage of. And so I think what we try and do is not only talk about why it's great to actually have some experience and knowledge in this area, but also the benefits of it as it relates to, as we teach community funding models at the Void Academy, community models that, they're business models and they're a little bit, they feel a little bit more organic in some ways because the way that we teach it is building individual relationships with people who can support at many different levels with a lot of socioeconomic diversity with regards to who can be an arts patron. And I think that is a little bit more easy for artists to get on board with, especially if they know that sometimes bigger institutions or other funding models they'll have to jump through a lot of hoops for, like grant models or working with gallerists who may take a larger percentage. I think there's a sense too that those don't quite work, and so I think more of the artists that I talk to now are saying, all right, I know I'm supposed to be thinking in this way. I know I'm supposed to be imagining myself as a competent business person. I don't feel like that at all. I feel like I can't do this at all, but maybe there's a way to provide that education and provide that level of comfort with this stuff so that it's not so scary. And that's what we're trying to do, basically.
Okay. All right. Now, Joe, your funding platform, Friends, is a crowdfunding site, but it focuses on organizations that are up and running. And so could you talk about the difference in crowdfunding in the beginning as opposed to what Friends focuses on, which is engaging with the already existing community for a space that's operating?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say necessarily it's just like a beginning or an ongoing thing, because I think probably as many of the examples you guys are talking about might be an artist or an organization that's been doing something for a while and is working on something new. But essentially in the same way that the time frame and both the time frame and the amount is critical, it's also the project is critical. It's typically something that you potentially can risk happening or not happening. So what I would say the role of really membership campaigns in general are everything that we were talking about before in terms of engagement. All this one-on-one, the massive importance of one-on-one engagement and people understanding that, like, you don't build an arts organization, you don't build a community with a mailing list. That is a tool potentially to start some conversations or find some people, but you build it one person at a time. And it's really important to figure out, in fact, I would say critical in New York City, running like a music venue that's trying to survive, to be as engaged as possible with those people. And what crowdfunding has done in general has made all of us realize that there's, maybe 80% of the people who are coming to your space don't have the capacity to donate, but a typical development team is then only going to focus on 1%. And there's this whole huge 19% of your community that has some extra money that you don't even really have to beg them for. They would like to provide it to you if you're able to give them a simple to understand method to do so. And I think that a lot of people don't even understand that about their own communities. They're just like, well, it's like Silent Barn has 3,000 people that come through its door every single month, and we make almost zero in fundraising annually, as Samira knows. Yeah, I keep being like, wow, Samira knows everything. So the thing that Friends does, which we think is unbelievably unique, and this is why we made it, is that is something that you should be engaging with your community on constantly. And that this is a way that, in fact, one might see it even as a preparation, the type of stuff that you're talking about, where it's like, how do you even know what amount of money, like the thing that I was sort of like referencing before, like, we just didn't know like what Silent Barn was worth, and it was not $1 million at that moment in time. But who knew? We didn't understand anything about money, really, at that moment in time. And so I think that one of the purposes of a crowdfunding membership tool like Friends is it helps you understand the value in your community that then you can use as a launching pad for things like this. It basically helps you see what all that social capital is in a dollar sign. And, a membership platform like the Whitney has or any of these like larger institutions, that's like the membership equivalent of development pre-crowdfunding. It was like the idea that you just went after these like big fish. And we all know that, in fact, the reason why crowdfunding works is not conceptual, it's tool-based. It's because there is a tool like Kickstarter. There is a social media system that allows something to go viral. Without that, the concept that you could get $3 from everybody in your community wouldn't function. So that's why we built this thing, is because we think that same logic applies to memberships, and that will help you understand what your community is willing to support you with.
Okay, and I think, one great realization with crowdfunding is that yes, you can harness the power of your whole community, even if they're giving a few bucks here and there. I wanted to ask Sienna, what are the misconceptions that you come across with your clients in what they think about crowdfunding?
It's a great question. Actually, so not to like plug the courses that we teach too much, but the first course that is on our site is actually a free course, Fundamentals of Crowdfunding. And the first section, I think it's the second section, is what are the misconceptions around crowdfunding? Because there are a lot of them, and I think one of them that was one that I mentioned before, which is, that there's not really a lot of preparation involved. I just throw the page up and people will give me money. And I think that again, you can do that, and some crowdfunding projects succeed, but would you really want to represent your artwork in that way? Would you really want that to be the way that a community or new people find out about your work in a place where you haven't put any effort in, you haven't put any preparation into that space? I think another misconception around crowdfunding is that it is begging. And people forget about the exchange aspect, and they forget about that when you think about yourself, at least when I think about myself as someone who has supported Kickstarter campaigns and Patreons and that kind of thing, it makes me happy to do that. It makes me feel involved with the artist. I like getting things in return. I like seeing, having this personal connection with an artist whose work I've kind of fallen in love with. And I think that is forgotten about from the perspective of the artist, who gets really scared that like, oh my God, I'm putting myself out there and asking for money. That's terrifying, and I'm making myself into a charity case, and that's not acceptable. And I think to think about it as more of, framing it as this exchange where you're actually giving people who otherwise may not be able to support this kind of artwork the chance to do that. That's how we sort of try and reframe that misconception around it, or that fear.
To that, one of the things that is a common, especially with artists who have had careers, who, are thinking about a new phase, maybe not working with a label anymore. And when I first started at Kickstarter, this was a pretty consistent anxiety that I was being presented with by people I was talking to. And someone who wasn't thinking about running a campaign but had been in music for a long time, a journalist, was like, but begging happens all the time behind the scenes, right? Like you're begging your label for a budget for this, or and there's been these layers of protection, I think, that present some kind of like optical security from the actual same functional dynamic, and that exposure is real. Like that vulnerability is super real and super. I try to respect it as much as possible and think about it as, that is intense to go and say like, hey, I'm trying to do this thing, and whoa, I've been doing it for a long time, but I'm doing it in a new way, and I want you to be there. But when it does happen, almost every time that artist that sort of like had to come and muster up the confidence has had almost like an emotional transformation from that dynamic of support and feeling that their community is there for them and showed up. And it is really something that I can't say is going to be the case, but generally is so.
Okay. All right.
Thanks. So I was just going to say, like the fear is certainly real, and I think a lot of that comes back to, not knowing what number you can place on your community, really, like what they're capable of. But the opposite of that is that once you pull back those layers of all of the like hustling that has to happen secretly just so you can present an art project and everyone can be like, oh yeah, they totally have it figured out, right. Which they say about Silent Barn all the time, which is not true. Some journalist at some point wrote that we like get lots of grants, and then other journalists just copy this over and over again. And it's like every single time an article comes out, we have to write them and be like, we've got like we actually just finally got 2 of grants for the first time ever in like in the last 2 months, and it's amazing. But up until that, we got $500 for the picnic benches outside, and that was the only grant we got.
It should be called Demystifying Silent Barn.
I think that's a big part. One of the big things that I just wanted to point out is that demystifying what your community is willing to do to support you is one of the magic parts of crowdfunding. And I think that it's important to recognize that it's a tool in this entire like financial system. BK Co-op doesn't necessarily accept a successful Kickstarter as like a documented like business success, but I do think that factors in when you're thinking about whether or not a business is going to be successful. If you're able to show that, like,
venture capital world, right? Like
for sure,
it's almost a requirement for products to have this demonstration of interest.
Right. So like in whatever method, either through Friends or through Kickstarter or through whatever platform you're using, that you can help demonstrate what your community is willing to put in, to this project, will transform financing. It will transform how the public is going to look at you. And like in Silent Barn's case, we were shocked to find out that $40,000, which seemed like the most amazing thing that had ever happened to us, of course, like was not anything when you were actually running a business, because we didn't know what money was. So, but that $40,000 was invaluable for all of the financing that came next, and trying to talk to institutions and individuals and organizations about how to support this space, and then finding 3, 4, 5 times that amount of money from another source, and being able to keep going back and being like, this is just what they did in 2 months. Think of how they might be willing to support us over the next 10 years.
Yeah, one last thing on that topic. Yes, it can be a jumping off point to future funding in other arenas, but also, I have a lot of examples of artists that I've worked with who have run one crowdfunding campaign and then were able to do another one at a much higher level because they kept in touch with the community that they funded from in the first place, and that community was able to expand and grow even further. So I think it also is one crowdfunding campaign can expand not only into a larger secondary or tertiary time-based campaign, but also into something that's recurring funding from a community as well.
Okay. So yeah, while we're on the topic of crowdfunding, let me just ask broadly, what is a successful crowdfunding campaign? Is it always reaching the goal? or are there other criteria that makes a crowdfunding campaign successful?
I think you do need to reach your goal to be successful, but I think that it's not, what we've sort of referred to. It's not necessarily just about that financial success. That there's, there's more to it, and certainly, maybe one of the things, Joe, you're talking about too, is it's sort of like centralizing action. So, in less cool terms, maybe it's a marketing event, just sort of, we're doing this thing. And I have a friend who just did a campaign a few months ago for his vegan eggplant jerky. And, he came to he sent it to me, and I sort of looked at it with as sort of naive eyes as I possibly could. And I was like, why is it priced at X or Y? Are you trying to make the actual production of your first line with this? And he was like, no. I was like, well, bring the cost down to what it costs, and, make sure you don't lose money. But if you wanted people to get on board and get multiple, really get into this whole new sort of revolutionary product, make it be about that. Make it be about the thing you're trying to do, and get excited about that versus the specific reward and, the money piece of it.
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
Really
sure.
briefly, one other thing I think that is crucial to crowdfunding success: if you can reach your financial goal and still fail at your crowdfunding campaign if you don't do what you've said you're going to do, or deliver the rewards that you said you were going to deliver. I think the most important piece is that you keep your promise to the people who have backed and invested in the work that you're creating. So even if you make all the money, you're going to lose your entire community and end up with a lot of pissed off people if you don't keep your word. And I think... Exactly. That means you have to do the work in advance. You have to know the cost of what it's going to cost to deliver that kind of, to deliver on your word. And also, even if you don't have everything perfectly planned out ahead of time, I think the worst thing you can do is just drop off the face of the planet to the people. You know what I mean? So yeah, you don't want to disappear on people. As long as I've backed a couple crowdfunding campaigns that have not gone as planned, or the rewards were not delivered when they said they would, or I didn't get the thing. But because they reached out and said, "Hi, backers, these are the glitches we've run into," I'm like, all right, that's cool. I'm. No problems here. But for other campaigns that I've given them my $5 or $10 and then they haven't communicated with me, that's been a frustration, and I probably wouldn't support them in the future. So I think that's a big key factor.
Okay. Can I ask Samira a question? I'm curious. How often do people come in with crowdfunding or some other sort of social demonstration of their business project as part of the application? I was saying that before, but how does that factor in at all in terms of financing at BK Co-op?
I don't know of any.
Well, that's straightforward.
I mean, I don't. I'm not the business loan officer anymore. Yeah, I don't know of any though offhand. How would it factor in? It'd be nice. It'd be nice. It'd be nice. But I think that it would. I think your instinct was correct in that probably the bank is going to be looking at over a longer period of time, and so optimally you would match that period of time with the amount of time it would take to repay the loan. What is going to be the source of income that repays the loan?
Potentially reoccurring memberships or something.
Yeah. Yeah. As you were asking that, Joe, I was thinking that earlier when Samira was saying that the minimum requirement was basically that you could demonstrate that you're functioning as a business. In a lot of ways, it's self-fulfilling because you have a successful crowdfunder. People take notice. You get all these other offers and things that just gets the ball rolling. It just seems that these things are more related than one would think. So. That's just something that I took away. But at this time, I think, I think we should open it up for Q&A from the audience. So I don't know if we have a microphone, but if someone wants to just yell out a question.
Hi, so it seems like all of your advice so far has been focused towards an implicit assumption that there is a business that is for-profit. How does your advice change if the entity is going to be a nonprofit, or if at all?
I don't know if that's necessary. I mean, I think that we could get into like the differences between nonprofit businesses and for-profit businesses, and that's like a whole like kind of legal. I think actually legal structure was in the other conversation, but I think that there is an implicit understanding that you will be getting enough money to pay for whatever you're spending money on, but that is true for a nonprofit as much as it is for a for-profit. So like, and I guess what my point is that it doesn't actually, I don't think, like you might get all of the money you need to do the thing you're doing from Kickstarter, you know, like or maybe you're getting it from Kickstarter to pay back the loan that you had to take out beforehand or something kind of risky like that. But it doesn't necessarily, I actually don't think that we're necessarily suggesting that you have to then also be running some kind of other project, because if it's an individual artist project, they could just be making the taking in that money for the printing of the record, and that's the whole entity, you know.
But nonprofits do run campaigns. You know, one of the distinctions of Kickstarter is that the campaigns need to be around making something creative. So you know, it's not for charity, and it's not something that you're directly fundraising for, unfortunately, hurricane relief or something like that. But you can have a creative work that funds the organization that then does what it will with it.
And I think also, you know, in terms of nonprofits that have run campaigns that I've worked with, I think it's a matter of, you know, the donors can, or the backers can get tax deductions for larger, if they're going to be backing at higher levels through the Kickstarter. So they may, you know, that's one way that you can attract people to those higher reward tiers, perhaps, is by talking about that if you're a nonprofit.
Liz?
This is a question for everyone except for Joe, because he has an answer for this already, but what is a fundraising tool for creative projects that you don't see currently existing right now that you wish existed?
Liz, would you mind saying that louder?
I was curious if they had like any thoughts on like directions that they wish that fundraising for art projects would go in, or like a tool that they wish existed that doesn't, or just like something that's kind of like missing from the picture of fundraising.
I've thought of like a million of these and can't think of one right now, but I know that I had this thought about like this idea of having a way to easily sign up for an artist crowdfunding campaign in the space where you're seeing that artist. And I know we all carry our phones, but like something that was like an easy way to, like a station or I don't know what, but that reminded people that this artist that you're seeing on a stage, also if you want to be in touch with them and perhaps give them $1 recurring or right now, that there would be a way to do that in that space and not just like when you're at home at your computer or whatever.
One area that I've thought is still sort of ready for some help in this area, it's just for touring bands who are really like going around the country, and how they, you know, will go, they have to cross this huge country if they want to go from New York to LA, and generally there's going to be some empty rooms along the way. And when I was touring and there was no internet, no cell phones, you know, that, well, in the early days, you know, everything was like a kind of a crapshoot. And now I think there's a lot less risk involved, and there are lots of different tools, but I don't think that anything is really worked thoroughly yet. And that would be great.
I just wanted to shout out, this isn't, I think this is different than what Liz was telling me I shouldn't say anything about, but I just wanted to shout out for the thing that you're talking about. If anybody goes to Baby Castles has one of my favorite fundraising tools that I've ever seen is they have an ATM that you feed money to. That's awesome. Which honestly, like I've been trying to like talk to the like wacky developer that made this like ATM machine, and it looks like an ATM machine, but it takes your money, and then it has a high scoreboard next to it of per event, per week, per like month, and per year of like who's been doing it, and you put in your initials like the same way as if it was like an arcade. It's so amazing.
That's amazing.
There's always somebody working on something. That's the cool thing.
So
So my question is for Samira. In the case that people are seeking out financing for business and they're really just starting out what they have, of course, in this day and age, we have a lot of student loan debt and, generally like other things in our lives and we're struggling to get by. How much do those sort of personal financial aspects sort of play into getting loans and participating in business as like a business entity, whether you have, whether you're incorporated already or if you're not?
It's really critical, and they can be separated on paper, of course, because there is such a thing as business income and then personal income, business debt, and personal debt. But at this stage, you are going to be guaranteeing the loan as a person, even if you are incorporated and you're signing as the chairperson of the board or as the executive director of this company, that's fine. But you will also be signing as an individual. So your personal finances will be a factor. The way in which you might imagine imagine that working is perhaps in thinking about what I'd said earlier about keeping the day job. There ought to be a demonstration, or we would look for a demonstration that you do have enough income coming in to cover these fixed expenses. So your housing expenses and your debt service expenses, those are fixed. There ought to be money coming in to be able to cover those. Insofar as the business also generates income for you, that's great. The loan payment hopefully is covered by that. But then if the business income isn't enough, then your personal income should also be enough now and then to cover the loan payment when the business income can't.
yes.
I have a banking question. So, if I'm an artist and I'm thinking about making a business bank account, is there a number of income that you would like laugh at? When I show up, it's like I got an artist thing on the side, and I want to have a separate business account to track it. Like, or should there be a number that I have in mind? Like, when I get there, that's when I should open my account. Otherwise, it would be a joke when I go to the bank.
No, yeah. Well, the number at Brooklyn Co-op is $5, right? It's $5 minimum balance to have the account. You can do that. There's no number. The important thing with the business account is that you manage it as such. So it's probably fine that at the end of the month or at your low point of the month that you're just at that $5 minimum. It doesn't matter to us in the slightest. You should be able to, in the end, say or show that your expenses and your income were tracked credibly through your business account, and that helps demonstrate that the business has a life of its own.
I have a question about the rewards program. I'm part of a creative group that's doing an art installation, one timepiece for a nonprofit. But we're both really small groups. We don't really have crazy rewards to offer. But we've been talking to a member from the Kickstarter team. They said like having a 7-tier rewards program is a really good idea, and definitely helps.
Doesn't have to be too many rewards. Yeah.
What kind of rewards would you like recommend for like 3 kids in an office and a small nonprofit in San Francisco?
Yeah, I mean, I admit I'm more focused on the music kinds of projects, but I think the theory is the same. You sort of have something that's really low stakes, just the updates and a way to engage and for them to support you. And like you were saying, it's not always about the thing. They want you to be creative and be your artist. And that's why membership programs are emerging. Is that it's a classic way of thinking of supporting, but modern style. But then, generally something that's in the $10 to $15 range, like a token, that's, an easy-ish thing. It should, hopefully, I always recommend it shouldn't be super wacky and like don't make shot glasses and crap that's, not necessary. And that's going to break, and just, it's like, oh yeah, maybe you if you're a big artist, maybe you'll raise an extra $1,000 or something, but I think the pain at the end of the campaign is not worth that. And then, like in music, the average pledge is $70 across all the different campaigns. And so, like, most of the album campaigns are $55 to $60. So that's like a deluxe album or something like that. But I think it's pretty consistent when you think about all of the different kinds of categories that, something that's a digital simple thing to do, and then something a little bit higher value that really gets you connected. I mean, especially in art, having a print or, a postcard or something that is a tangible connection to the work is pretty great.
So last I checked, no, you're the expert too. Last I checked, in the arts category, the most common pledge is $25, and the one that makes the most money for artists is the $100 level. So I always recommend that artists have a $25 level, a $100 level, and then a $1 level. You want to have something that anyone feels like they can get on the ground. They'll put their dollar in, even if they don't know you that well. That's a really important level to have. And I also recommend, I'm a big fan of immaterial or digital rewards. So even if you're 3 people in an office, you can put together, like, I don't know, what is the project funding?
We're creating for Trans Awareness Week an installation to support Trans Lifeline, which is a small group in San Francisco. They're run completely by transgender volunteers. They're really small. They're growing, but they have growing pains. So they're more focused on building out the platform so that they can take more phone calls for transgender individuals in crisis. So they really can't give us anything glamorous like swag bags or anything. But
Yeah.
we want to help them to get their name out there and to get more funding for them.
That's
What we're trying to do.
That's awesome. That sounds like an awesome mission. And I think like something like, something that's really easy to put together is an ebook, like a digital ebook where you make a Word document that's like 8 pages, right? Or what, it could be 5 pages, but with some images, with some descriptions. I don't know, exactly what kind of arty angle you could have, but then you just export that as a PDF, and you have that at the $1 or the $10 level, and you say you'll get this ebook, this digital book where you get awesome visuals and behind-the-scenes stuff, based on the mission of the organization.
That's like co-op, but how far into the project, because we were told 30 days is like the sweet spot.
Yes.
How far in can we send that stuff out without it looking like we're being sketchy and not handing stuff out? Like, if we don't give it to them the day they donate, is that okay?
Oh no, most rewards are delivered after the campaign. I mean, rewards should be delivered after the campaign is over.
Silent Barn took a year.
Yeah, you can take a year.
Actually, I mean, if you
Yeah.
if you consider delivering the venue the most important reward of our campaign, it took us a year and a half.
Yeah. Also, like live streams, like access to a live stream for backers only is a cool thing that you can do that is no overhead. An interview, maybe like an interview with one of the members of the organization via live stream that backers get access to. So think about creative, digital, immaterial things that you don't have to necessarily mail or give to them, but that can provide an experience for the backer. And yeah, you don't send rewards until the campaign is over and successful, and even then you can take some time. So yeah.
I kind of just wanted to reiterate that really the thing that people want is to engage with the project. And I think that the project that you're describing especially so, but these platforms are all about engaging with taking the person who's the audience, who's the viewer, and engaging it with the institution. So the thing with a lot of this immaterial stuff is that just think of ways that they can feel a little more special and more part of it. And so in fact, actually, a lot of the swag that you're talking about does the opposite. That's not necessarily going to bring them closer. And like, things that, just like one like funny example is like, I was trying to help us fundraise last night. This is our fundraising week. For Silent Barn, and a bunch of people bought memberships just based on the idea. I was like, anytime that you come, I'm gonna give you a high five when you're back inside the space. And that's like absurd, but it wasn't for it was for like $1, but they're like, that's awesome. Yeah, I wanna get a high five every time I walk into Silent Barn. And I'm like, you got it, it's right here. And then the other one is like the Detective Squad, which is this synth shop that's in the back of Silent Barn. I've been talking to him about setting up a membership campaign, and he was like, oh, for $25 a month, I'll send you my phone number, and you can call me when you need synth advice. And I was like, that's amazing. That's exactly, it doesn't cost him anything, and maybe he'll have so many members that becomes like a huge burden, but at that point, that's just like incredible for him. That's an incredible problem to have. And that just means that his like synth shop is like doing amazingly well. So I think as long as you can figure out how to tier those immaterial offers well so that people feel like they're intimate at the amount that they paid, you've nailed it.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
I just wanted to ask you all about crowdfunding, like fatigue or burnout. It's something that I've experienced in like my arts community is that like people are just like not another one, and so like what do you do with that? Like
The well is dry. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely something that has to be evaluated within the community or within the individual, and I think it probably also when there is sort of a recurring or membership plan that you can engage. You know that these are good problems to have. That there might be so many people, but you know a lot of the people in creative work. Want to just be making things and want to be writing songs or want to be making artwork and don't really want their webcam on while they're doing it to just so I mean that's a little divergent from what your question was, but I mean there's no solution necessarily, but I think it's a real issue and I think it has to be managed properly by the person creating the work.
Yeah, I also think that, I mean, that's obviously an issue where there's so many campaigns out there, and how do you not get a little bit like, oh my God, another crowdfunding campaign? You know, people have the choice to be on the internet or not. You know what I mean? Like you don't have to engage with the campaigns you don't want to. Someone feeling a little annoyed isn't like the biggest problem, but I do think focusing as a creator, if you focus on that exchange aspect, like focusing on something that will get people excited to be involved, like what are they getting in return versus just the process of asking for something. I think you can mediate a little bit of that. Like if you say, okay, this awesome print or this awesome experience, and you're putting that out there and not just back the campaign, but hey, this thing is amazing, don't you want to experience this? Or hey, this thing is amazing, don't you want to have one in your living room? Whatever it is, you know? And not focusing on the fact that you're asking them to back, but focusing on that exchange that's happening between the artist and the creator, that can mediate this feeling of like, oh my God, you know, someone's just asking for money, that's it.
I would also add that while I think it's important to note that the project that I'm working on doesn't apply in the same way to like individual artist projects, but as it relates to music venues, especially if they're doing ongoing programming, I think the issue is more about timing and context than burnout. Because one of the ways that most campaigns function is that you have a program that you're organizing and that people are maybe super excited about and coming out to. They're paying for tickets, they're buying beer, they're engaged in a bunch of different ways. But then you're trying to direct them to this whole other space that they may or may not want to go to, that a bunch of people are trying to get them to go to, and it may or may not be at the right time when they're thinking about it. It might be when they're trying to like clear their inbox in the morning or whatever, and they're trying to deal with something else. So I do think that through our platform or any other way that you're fundraising, if you can make sure that you are engaging the person at the moment when they're already excited about what it is that you're doing, they're not burnt out. That moment when they're already engaged with you is the moment when they are going to be most willing to give. And they've already brought themselves to you. They already want to come see the event. They already want to be part of your organization, not just conceptually, but in that moment. And I think that's a tricky thing to hit. And I think it comes back to what you're talking about on-site. Like thinking about on-site tools is a big question, because that's the moment, not at 9 a.m. on a Monday. Right. And I think that spreads into even like email timing and the fact that it's just that like, people, if we think of this as like you're trying to create a successful transaction, you have to ask for something at the moment that they want it. And that changes day to day, moment by moment. So I don't think that like, just because you feel that your community is not engaged or doesn't want to donate, I think that might be an issue of timing or context. And I actually would concretely believe that most of the time that is the issue, is timing and context.
So I think we only have time for 2 more questions.
I'm going to piggyback on this one, but from the opposite side, burnout. So we've heard like, don't quit your day job. You got to keep doing the work that you actually want to do, right? That you're doing all this for, and you want to be like engaging with people on this like very personal level to build your community. Like that's kind of like a lot to keep going all at the same time. So like, what would you all advise as sort of like the drumbeat for like keeping the engagement going, to be able to build a membership, to have sustainable income, to just keep this like machine kind of running? I've been there, I failed.
Yeah,
So.
I mean, it's absolutely, obviously there are, people who just never stop and then do burn out. So, that's not advised generally. I think it's a personal decision on what you can maintain. I don't think, my answer is that, I'm sorry, I can't see you, but I know you're there. I don't think that there's anything that's perfect for, but you have to do what's healthy and right for you. I don't think that the audience there's a massive, clear expectation of like, I must hear from this artist at this frequency in order to feel the value. They want you to be happy and successful too, and if you're not doing the work, that's probably not that's not successful for anyone. But there is a lot of pressure, and I think it's real, and I think this level of engagement, like if you're just doing a Kickstarter campaign that's 30 days, it's pretty much your life for those 30 days and probably the 30 prior, and then certainly until the rewards are fulfilled, it's a certain segment. And then if you're doing something that's in the more recurring membership model now, that there's a frequency of availability. But I think that's also in the social media reality too. Like some artists are so engaged with their audience that they feel like an obligation, and that's healthy for them maybe, but not sustainable. So.
I was just going to add that I think that it's kind of similar to the question of knowing the value that your community is able to put in and support you. You definitely have to think long and hard and continue to iterate and learn and listen to your own body and time itself to understand your own capacity to be able to put in. And obviously, I think that it goes without saying that pretty much every creative project that anybody in this room is working on, they are willing to go further and harder, and that's what's motivating them. But there's always a limit, and you have to be able to recognize that limit and be clear to your audience about that limit, and just like understand your capacity, because the long goal is you build up that. If you can build up the community to support you, the impact of that same capacity can grow. So I think that a lot of times one of the main things that I would say is the mistake that people make is that the shortcoming that they're having on themselves, because maybe they haven't been able to plan in advance or whatever, they're not able to figure out how to translate that ask to their community and scale up their capacity in line with the community's support. And so I think that it's kind of, again, like a timing issue. It's like when you get over and ahead of the growth that you're building from your community itself. Yeah.
If I might, take a different angle, because sometimes I think that I do have a great deal in common with the small businesses that come to the credit union, because to be honest, I've been at the credit union since it was founded, and that is my small business, and I've been running it for a long time. How do you keep running? How do you keep doing this? And we've certainly had our ups and downs. It's not so easy to be a small financial institution. So I think that one of the things that has helped me is this advice from my hairdresser back in the day, and it was, because I think Joe just mentioned, if you ask for help, sometimes it comes, but then you keep asking, and it keeps coming, and then you have this guilt as well, and I can't keep asking for more. I can't keep asking for more. How many nights out am I going to spend? Someone's got to be home with the baby. And she was like, yeah, no, I hear you, because she runs now 4 salons, so she was in a similar position back then. And it was like, her perspective was that
it's actually a great blessing and a privilege to even be in that position to ask for help. There are many people, hundreds, thousands of people who can't yet even get to that position where they're able to ask for the help and be able to turn that help into something material. So she was like, you know, if it's available at that point, it was like my mom, you know, how many nights am I gonna say I can't come home, somebody has to watch the baby. So she's like, you know, she's there, she's able to do it, she's young enough, she's healthy enough, she wants to be with the baby. As long as she's able to say yes, then you should feel not guilt and be able to ask her to say that.
And it has helped at other points in the credit union too, when we weren't doing so well, to say, look, you know, we made it to 5 million in assets. That's huge because we started at 0, and then that's an accomplishment. And then we made it to 10 million in assets, and that felt like, okay, now we're big. Now we're not little no more. Then it was like, oh, the next thing, we're never going to get to 20 million in assets. Then you make it to 20 million assets, and then you look around and you realize I'm the only credit union that's still standing after 15 years. Maybe we'll make it to 25 million in assets next year. And it continues each year to feel more and more like a privilege and a blessing to even have been in that position. That helps me.
All right. So I don't know. Oh yeah, my mic is working. So I guess I'm gonna cut it there. I'm going to just add 3 insights that I got from the meeting, and the first is you should, before you go to a bank, you should talk to a financial counselor, learn if your business idea is viable, and you know that's a good thing to do. Engagement with your audience is key. Something that a lot of the panelists tonight talked about. And engagement is not just, you know, before the Kickstarter campaign, but throughout the life of your business cycle. And then the last thing that I got from the meeting was just the realization that your community will help you. So a lot of times it's hard to think that, you know, why am I continually asking for help? But, you know, your community wants the service that you're providing, and you're uniquely positioned to offer that. So just, you know, believe that your community will be there to support you, and keep engaging and keep asking. I'm going to turn it over to the panel just for one either insight or plug that you have for all of us.
VoidAcademy.com.
No, this has been wonderful. I've actually learned a tremendous amount, and that's a huge gift for me, so thank you.
Thank you.
I have an insight. I think that something that you just said really resonated with me, which is this idea of the privilege and accountability that comes with being able to accept support from your community. And we were talking a lot about these obstacles of the fundraising landscape, and governments aren't giving loans, and real estate's so expensive, and all of this stuff. The opportunity that each of us have in our capacity to take money directly from people who are willing and able to offer it, and then redirect that, like each of us make the decision on how to redirect that. We're doing the jobs that all of those governmental institutions are supposed to do, and we're potentially doing it in a much more direct and grassroots way, and I think that that is really amazing and inspiring. And I think as long, it's only as amazing and as inspiring as we understand what Samira is just saying, that is an enormous privilege, and that comes with a lot of accountability. And like the project that you guys are working on is a perfect example of that. This is something that like government institutions should be doing, and instead, because they're not, it's on us to do so. So my plug is withfriends.co. And I'll be at this membership table over there. It is a totally private beta right now, but if anybody here is interested in piloting it, just talk to me afterwards.
Thank you. I appreciated the insight that Sienna had brought up early on about sometimes artists not being able to consider themselves as business owners or as entrepreneurs, and not approaching their work in that way, and how that may in the medium term end up disadvantaging them because they're missing an aspect which other people for sure are watching. And so I think maybe in line with the same idea of, well, even if you have just the $5, you know, open the bank account and begin to, in that sense, take some, it's almost a measure of self-respect, right? Like, this is going to be my bank account. This is going to be my business. I deserve it. I'm going to work hard towards it, and I'm going to watch it grow and prosper. So I think that's true for artists and other business owners.
I just have one last insight, which is if you're an artist and you're considering doing a crowdfunding project, and I kind of mentioned this before, but I really recommend going out there, researching other projects that are out there, and backing a campaign. You should not run any crowdfunding project until you've actually had the experience of being a patron, and thinking about it from that perspective is really important, I think.
Okay, great. I'm going to thank you guys very, very soon. But before that, I just want to talk a little bit about Silent Barn Fundraising Week, because that's what this is. I don't know how many of you have been here the prior 2 nights, but there have been some great shows. There's a great show tonight. Silent Barn is moving into a new phase. We're in the process of becoming a 501c3 nonprofit. At that time, we'll be in line to receive a lot of grants from the federal government. But before then, we do rely on the support of our friends and community. So we do offer memberships, and the membership allows you to go to any Silent Barn show, all year long, and that membership is $25 a month. We have a membership table outside. If you're so inclined, feel free to support us that way. With that, I'm going to thank our esteemed and knowledgeable panelists for such a great evening, and thank you.
Can we clap for Mike too for being a good moderator?
Stay tuned for Estrabos, Warriors, and Dump Him. And one thing I'll leave with, this is off the record if there are any writers or bloggers here, but if any of you like, if any of you like Snail Mail or another band that's playing here, Speedy Ortiz, they're gonna be here tomorrow and Friday night. So I'm killing the secret, but it's between friends. Thank you.